right, good morning YouTube friends. Let's point that up a little. There we go. So we're going to do something a little different today. This is a friend of mine's truck, and his oil pressure gauge drops out at idle, even at stoplights and once the thing's up to temperature and maybe even cold. This is a 2003 Ram 2500. So this has a V8, which is a cam and block pushrod type engine. So in this instance, because it's not an overhead cam engine, we'll go ahead and fire the truck up and show you what's going on. If this was an overhead cam engine, I wouldn't want to start it with it doing what it's doing, because in this instance it's not making a bunch of valve noise. If it was an overhead cam engine and it really had an oil pressure issue, it wouldn't make valve noise. But where this is a cam and block pushrod type engine and it's not making a bunch of noise when the oil pressure drops out on the gauge, it probably doesn't actually have an oil pressure issue. If it was making a bunch of noise, I wouldn't start it up, because it probably needs an oil pump. I suspect it only needs an oil pressure switch or oil pressure sender. Because it has a gauge, it should be an oil pressure sender. So let's start it up. And it does show oil pressure. And once it comes up to temperature, the oil pressure will drop out. So I suspect it's got good oil pressure, but the sender isn't working when the oil pressure is a little bit lower, like at idle. So let's hook a scan tool up and see what we get for codes. This is my personal scan tool. It's an Apollo D9 from when I was working on cars. So we'll just wait for it to auto ID. Oh, it's a 2004 Dodge, sorry. 4.7 liter V8. And that all looks correct to me. Engine, codes, codes, no codes. Isn't that interesting? Let's go back and back. Data display. Oh, we'll just go to a PID list. And this really could have a bad oil pump or stuck relief valve, because it does have 156,000 miles on it. Sorry, 157,000 miles. All right, that's not in there. Let's go to the cluster. Okay, we don't care about audio. Let's go to stored codes. And we don't care about the door lock. We're just after oil pressure. Let's go data. And our oil pressure hasn't dropped out yet, but we're not up to temperature yet either. Let's go functional tests. And it doesn't really give me a lot because this truck's kind of old and it doesn't have the kind of computer systems in it that a new one would have. And oil specs and resets, that's just to turn off the maintenance reminder. That doesn't give us oil pressure or anything in the dash. So we can go ahead and get out of this. And we can go put the scanner away. And I'm going to let it run until the oil pressure drops out, and then I'm going to put a mechanical gauge on it and see if the mechanical gauge does the same thing as the gauge in the dash. If it does, we've got a real issue. If it does not, we've just got a sending unit. So we'll be back in a minute. Alright, so this is what this thing's doing. Right now it's reading no oil pressure, but I don't have an oil light. The gauge has just dropped out. If I give it a little gas, it comes right up. And as soon as I let off the gas, it may or may not drop out. So let's make sure the oil light is working. Alright, it appears the low oil light is like burned out. It's not working. And I don't think the oil pressure actually dropped out. This is just a 4.7, so it is a Cannon block style engine, just an old school normal V8 with push rods and lifters. And it'd be noisy as hell right now if there was no oil pressure. So I'm going to crawl underneath. Maybe. Yeah, I guess I'll crawl underneath it and get an oil pressure gauge on it, a mechanical gauge, and see what it's actually reading at idle. Alright, we're all the way up to operating temperature. We're at about 35, 36 psi on idle. So I don't think there's any mechanical issues with the truck at all. I'm pretty sure it's nothing but a bad sending unit. And the sending unit itself had oil leaking through it, which is usually a good indication it's bad. And even if it's electrically not so bad, it's still bad because there's oil leaking through it. But it seems that the oil pressure has dropped as much as it's going to. We're all the way up to temp, and we've got all kinds of good oil pressure. So there's no mechanical issues with this. I think it's purely the sending unit. So I'm going to go price one out and call him and see what he wants to do. Alright, so here we are back in this truck again. I went and got his part and replaced the part, which is just a pressure switch. So this Dodge has a gauge for oil pressure, but the gauge doesn't mean anything. It's like a Ford. Ford does the same thing. All it has on the engine is just a pressure switch. So either there's enough pressure to actuate the switch or there's not. So essentially that gauge is nothing more than a light. And Ford is the same way. Like I said, a pressure switch does not actually tell you how much pressure you have. It just tells you that you either do or do not have pressure. But got the new one in. The engine has already cooled down a little bit, but I had it all up to temp, and we can run it up and let off the gas, and the gauge doesn't drop out now like it was before. So it's fixed. He's good to go. I'd have filmed a little more of this, but I'm doing this outside. It's probably 30 degrees out and snowing right now. So once it started snowing, I pretty well stopped filming. I had to run and get the part and all that. But there it is, fixed. And our temperature's creeping back up to temperature. So he'll be happy, and he can come get his truck and take this thing on that road trip he was going to take this weekend. So that's it for now. Hope you all have a great day. I know this was a little different, but I was an automotive tech for 12 years or so before I went to bikes. So this is right up my alley too. And yeah, that's it for now. We'll see you in the next one.